back, everyone, to Championship Formula. I'm your host, Casey.
And Thomas.
And we're back for another episode of Championship Formula.
Another thrilling episode.
Another thrilling one. Thank you, everyone, for your support. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. And this week's episode is NFC South.
The NFC South.
We're going to be talking about the Panthers, the Falcons, the Saints, and Buccaneers. These four teams are pretty interesting. They just got a new addition to their division with Tom Brady.
A new big addition.
And we feel like this is a pretty important division to talk about. It has a lot of playoff implications. A lot of stuff has happened with these teams. A lot of sleepers, a lot of rebuilding going on in this division. So we're going to hop right into it. Panthers are in full rebuild mode. They decided to pick Teddy Bridgewater up. They thought he was good enough to be a starting quarterback for now. Gave him a 3-year contract, I believe.
Yep.
And surprisingly, they also picked up PJ Walker. They liked what they saw with the XFL League. And we might actually see some competition between the two of them. That'd be really interesting to see. I know PJ Walker was pretty much balling out with the Houston Roughnecks when the XFL was still going on and he was in the running for MVP. So it'd be kind of interesting to see if Teddy Bridgewater ends up getting overtaken by PJ. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. I'm really interested to see where that team goes with the quarterback position.
Yeah, maybe they try to do something like kind of like how the Saints do with like multiple quarterback formations, which is kind of weird because that only happens when you see the name Taysom Hill somewhere. But
yeah,
maybe they try it. I don't know.
Yeah, and then, of course, they've got Christian McCaffrey there. They just re-signed him to make him the highest paid running back in the league. And well-deserved, no doubt about that. He has been carrying that team on his back for a couple seasons now.
Most definitely, yeah.
And they are going to need him this upcoming season. They're going to need him a lot. This team is still struggling, I think, in my opinion. I know they got a few additions on the offensive line, like Russell Okong, and it's an okay trade, in my opinion. But it doesn't really fix anything. It just kind of switches pieces around to, a tackle is more important than a guard, but will that really change the way that they gave up 58 sacks like last season? I don't really know. That's probably why they actually got Teddy Bridgewater in the first place, was because he is a mobile quarterback. And, they didn't have the ability to fix everything all at once. So what they did was settle for lesser elite talent like Robbie Anderson, which maybe he can evolve and be that number one guy. But they have 3 decent receivers now on offense, and they have plenty talent, in my opinion, on offense to be above average. I don't see them being any explosive like team. They're not going to blow your socks off or anything, but this team can definitely win some games, I think, at least at offensively. Now, defensively, with the unfortunate retirement of Luke Kuechly, I don't see this team's defense getting much better. I know that they picked up Derek Brown, and we talked about how good it was to have 2 above average pass interior rushers with Derek Brown and Quan Short. They're going to be needing those guys to really perform. Quan was out all last season, and he's underrated. He's pretty good. I think he gets overshadowed by the Aaron Donalds and the Geno Atkins because everyone knows those guys. But Quan Short was a big reason why in 2015, 2016, the Panthers went to the Super Bowl in the first place. He shored up the middle of that team along with Luke Kuechly. And with him being out all last season, you could really see that they were struggling, at least in the run defense department. And on top of that, they even got Bravion Roy, another rookie I kind of like. He's also a defense interior lineman. And I think they're going to be at least okay on the defensive line. I have no idea how they're gonna do everywhere else. They need help on all the other levels, but at least they've got that shored up. Don't expect a lot from this team. I think they probably go like 4-12, 6-10. They need a lot more pieces to fix this offensive line, and once they do that, they're probably going to shine because they do have lots of, I think, second guys at receiver position that can eventually evolve into first round, or not first round, but number one guys. DJ Moore specifically, I think, can definitely take over the number one role. But with the addition to Robbie Anderson, this team has the pieces to start rebuilding, but they're still in the rebuild mode, not expecting much.
You know what I really think they did this offseason was just go and get a bunch of depth. They really just went and got guys that aren't necessarily like you said, big name talents, but they did go get like Eli Apple. Like they signed Eli Apple, a couple of D linemen, some offensive linemen, some depth at offensive linemen, and that's kind of important because you get some competition in there. And when those guys start feeling competition for their job, their starting job, they start playing better. They start doing things that they didn't do last season. So you never know, some of those guys that weren't as good last season that were still getting that first team reps and everything, and games and everything. Maybe those guys step up because they got some competition behind them, or maybe some of those guys just, if they don't step up, then they just get kicked out, and then the guys behind them start running things.
Yeah, I mean, to go off that, this is a big couple years for Teddy Bridgewater. He's got some time to prove that he's a starting quarterback, and there's a lot of question marks with him. And this is an opportunity to show that they can build around him. If he does well with what's around him, they will build pieces for him. I think he is a franchise quarterback. We saw it with the Vikings. He kind of, he had an unfortunate injury, and that just pushed him out of that starting role. And, just bad timing for him. But I don't see them going after specifically quarterback in the next couple of years. I think they are okay with Teddy Bridgewater and PJ Walker, and I think they will be okay with those guys. It just is a matter of how many games that they win, what position they'll be in the draft. I don't see them picking number one. I see them maybe picking top 5 to top 10, but in between 5 and 10. So that's what I was trying to get at. They are going to be picking probably in between 5 and 10. And with that is a lot of good talent to pick from. We'll have to see what happens next season, but hopefully that they can turn this franchise around here soon.
I kind of think, just to counterbalance you here a little bit, I think the Panthers have the potential to be kind of like a little sleeper team. Not necessarily that they're going to light the world up and win like 13 games, but they could be that extra team that just scoots in with the 7th playoff team being in. So I like you said, with them losing Luke Kuechly, I think that's a big kind of issue for them because they lost their leader, like their number one guy, their main team captain kind of position. So somebody's going to have to step up and fill that. And with some of the additions they made, maybe one of those guys steps up and does it. But I really think Teddy Bridgewater is going to have to come in and start commanding like guys around, like telling them this is how we have to do it. This is what we got to do. We got to start moving, because I think that's a lot of what was missing with Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton, I hate to say this, but he had a little bit too much of an ego for himself, kind of, to be more of a team leader guy. I think that's where Christian McCaffrey kind of started to come in, where he ended up being their team leader kind of guy. He was rallying the troops kind of thing. And with Cam, into Cam Newton's defense, he really only had Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, and then Kyle Allen came in, and Kyle Allen got absolutely toasted for every freaking week. He just got smacked.
58 sacks. I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, and they ended up having a negative turnover ratio because every time he dropped back to throw the ball, he had more pressure in his face than Andy Dalton ever did. And that's really bad because, like, the second you start to throw with pressure in your face, nothing's accurate. You're throwing on the run and everything else.
And he was a rookie last season, right? Or
Yeah,
this was his first time in
yeah.
action.
This is like first full time season. So maybe Teddy Bridgewater comes in and he kind of, if he has an offensive line, maybe he just fixes things. I think they have the potential to like I said, be that sleeper team that comes in with the final seventh, or just be one of the wild card teams, basically at the end of the season. Because like you were saying, they did pick up some serious depth at receiver. They got a few guys. They got a lot of like good pieces moving forward. But again, as you said, they could also just be in 100% rebuild mode and just kind of buying their time for a couple of seasons from now.
Yeah, and the only reason I have that sort of position is because there are certain teams who are not doing great, but they can beat any team on any given Sunday. The Panthers are one of those teams currently with their roster is a very big question mark. They've got to figure out quarterback. They got to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their defense. They're a team I don't think can go out and beat any team on given Sunday. Another team, a couple teams that we'll talk about in this division that I think can beat any other team on any Sunday, like the Falcons. You know, I'm more worried about them when it comes to a schedule. And in the Panthers' defense, as I look at their schedule last season, they had a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they played the Texans, the 49ers, the Packers, they played Seattle. You know, they had some really tough competition sprinkled in there. The Titans, they had it a little rough. And plus, on top of that, I think they just lost momentum. You know, they came out, were 4-2. They lost really bad to the 49ers, and they even bounced back and beat the Titans. But right after that, they lose to the Packers, Falcons, Saints, Washington. They go on an 8-game losing streak. This team, halfway through the season, was 5-3. And that's nothing to scoff at. I know our Bengals were there 2 seasons ago, and we thought we had some serious talent on our team. It just happens to some teams. But as it stands right now, losing Luke Kuechly is a big loss, in my opinion. And, you know, I think maybe getting rid of Cam Newton, it could be a beneficial thing. It could be a detriment. He might have been carrying this team. We don't really know what his presence there really meant to the team. Mm-hmm. I do agree with you. Christian McCaffrey did take the team under his wing. He's now the new leader. But it will be interesting to see if that has any implication as to why they went on an 8-game losing streak. Is it because, you know, is he the piece that they need to move forward, or is he just the additional piece that they need to succeed? That's a really rough way to phrase it, but basically, quarterbacks are the leaders of the team, and most of the time, when you have a really, really good team, you have a really, really good quarterback. You just look at Packers, Seattle, 49ers, Texans, Saints,
Chiefs, all them.
Chiefs. You know, it just really will depend on whether or not Teddy Bridgewater is the guy there, in my opinion. If he's the guy there, oh yeah, definitely a sleeper pick. But if he's not, then it could be really ugly.
I really think they decided to move on from Cam Newton, one, because he was kind of demanding more money than he had showed the past couple of seasons. He didn't have a whole lot of help around him, but I still think that with what his ego was, he was kind of an Antonio Brown situation, in my opinion. Not that he was going out and saying this, that, and the other, but he would go out sometimes and just be like, look, I did my job. I don't know what everybody else is doing, kind of thing. And you can't really be that kind of guy. I mean,
point and blame.
Yeah, point and blame. Honestly, when it comes down to it, and you're talking to media as an NFL player, if they say anything about your teammates, honestly, just turn it back on yourself. Be like, I could have done this better. I could have done something better. Because the media, regardless of what they are, will find a reason to be like, oh, look, Cam Newton said this about Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey could have ran the ball better. He could have took a handoff better or something like that. Even if that's not exactly what he said, they'll find a way to be like, look, he said his teammate's name, so We need to get that into the news, and that's kind of how they roll. So then that just kind of paints your team in a bad light, and I know it doesn't sound like it should have a lot to do with your team, but when you start hearing media about your team doing this, that, and the other, you kind of start to believe it, and then you're hearing it, and then your team just starts to implode a little bit, like they did. So I mean, could it be they imploded last year because Cam Newton was gone? Maybe. Do I think Teddy Bridgewater can fill that? I really think he can because he's a little bit of a throwback to like earlier Cam Newton, when Cam Newton would be rolling out, running all over the field, kind of doing his Superman thing or whatever. But Cam Newton, as of the last couple of years, he's been hurt. He's slowing down. He's doing this, that, and the other. And so maybe Teddy Bridgewater comes in and is what Cam Newton was a couple of years ago when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, maybe. And he could probably be more stable, especially with the media perception. And in no regards is Cam Newton a bad person either.
Not at all.
I think he's totally misconstrued as some sort of diva, but he had those tendencies and that perception that people could get behind and believe. And Teddy Bridgewater is more of a guy who leads by example.
Yeah.
So they might need that. And, you know, we'll see how he does. I want to know if the offensive line has improved, if they've developed at all. I hope Russell Okung can possibly shave off 10 of those sacks. I mean, 58 sacks. That's ridiculous. It's hard to even have any sort of offense with that sort of pressure in your face, like you said. But continuing on from the NFC South, we're going to talk about the Falcons, a team that I think is not that far away from some sort of playoff run. The problem is, I feel like they have some sort of management issues, or they need to get in gear and find a new GM, because they made some like crazy questionable decisions this season. And I'm looking at their second round trade for Hayden Hurst, who has a potential big boom, but a serious big bust too. Yeah. It is a gamble that you're just rolling the dice on and hoping that Austin Hooper wasn't the guy there. You know, you let him go to the Browns and he had a career season with the Falcons, and you instead pick up a guy who's unproven. And yeah, he had better numbers in the combine. He's a younger guy, a smaller contract. But what you did instead with the money was picked up a guy who is somewhat proven in Fowler, but he had so much help on his defensive line. He had the legend Aaron Donald to, piggyback off of. And so 15 sacks is a lot for Dante Fowler, but will that translate with this Falcons defense? I don't know. I think they need a little help on the defense, and grabbing him is a good start, but you need just a little bit more to push you over the edge, especially when you let go of Vic Beasley. And on top of that, they didn't do a bad thing with his contract. They backloaded it, but that constricts them the next couple seasons. Yeah. So you're kind of shortchanging yourself, like you're giving yourself a boost now, but will that impact you later on? I think it does. And that's the sad thing, because I think this team is so close to going back to the Super Bowl. They're still got a lot of their core guys. They got Keanu Neal. They got Deion Jones. Deion Jones, their linebacker. They've got Julio Jones, the other legend. Yeah. And they've got Matt Ryan. They've got plenty of pieces. I just think, like, the addition to Todd Gurley too, like that is, in my opinion, wasted cap space. Like, if you don't give him that contract and, you use the second round pick instead on J.K. Dobbins, who is younger, doesn't have an injury history. And we've talked about this before. We like J.K. Dobbins. Yeah. We think he's going to be the next big running back. But, I don't know what their coaching staff, what they wanted to go for in the draft. Probably mainly defense, because they are expecting their offensive linemen to step up. Last season, they picked up Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry, a guard and a tackle, 13th and the 31st pick in the draft in 2019, they need to step up, because if not, they're going to be the biggest bust for the Falcons, and they're going to lose their window with now Matt Ryan being in his 13th season.
Mm-hmm.
Julio Jones isn't getting any younger, and it's just a lot of questionable gambles to me. And the thing is, I'm still scared of them in any given Sunday. I think they can beat any team. Julio Jones can take over any game at any point, and it can be a shootout from there. And I don't want to ever get into that sort of situation. So they really need to buckle down, look at each other in the mirror and ask themselves, is this the correct thing that we're doing? Is this how we're going to make it back in the short term, or do we want to start planning for our future because their window is closing?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because when you start to look at what they've done in the offseason, they've kind of moved things around a little bit. Like, they released a decent amount of players that you're like, why would they really release them? And then they signed a few guys. But then when you go to look just in April, they signed a lot of undrafted free agents. Like, obviously, there's going to be guys that they put on the practice squad and this, that, and the other. But I feel like they had a lot of room to sign undrafted free agents because they signed a boatload, which is usually a lot more than most teams even sign. There's a lot of guys that they released. Desmond Trufant. Like, I'm kind of like, I don't.
That's one of your staple guys.
Yeah, that's one of your main defensive guys. So I mean, I guess you're trying to move forward, and you don't think he's the guy to move forward with, but releasing Vic Beasley, like a bunch of guys they just release, and you're like, I don't understand. And then they go and sign Todd Gurley, and you're like, okay, that's a good move for them. I mean, Todd Gurley has been previously a really good back. We obviously don't know if that's gonna translate into Atlanta. He could come in and just absolutely stink it up because he's not used to that offensive line. They're not at what he had out in LA, and maybe he's not good. But like you said, you're taking a lot of chances on a lot of the moves they made. So I'm just confused on really what their management team and like their coaches and everything, what their mindset is for this. Because obviously in the draft they did get a few players, but it's like, I don't know. They like I said, they signed a lot of undrafted free agents. So you're kind of wondering, are they going to try to move some of those guys to be on their defense, to be their head guys on their defense, kind of start to move people in? Or are they just going to keep them as practice squad guys?
Yeah, and even the picks that they made in the draft, AJ Terrell as their first pick, I had him as a top second-round guy. But, not that they had much of a choice, but you could have shored up the safety position. Mm-hmm. I know that went really, really early in the second round, but the kid from Alabama, I think Xavier McKinney,
yeah,
he's good. And can you imagine having Keanu Neal and Xavier McKinney as your safety duo?
Yeah,
and you already got a good linebacker in Deion Jones, but they didn't really. My problem is they didn't really focus on defensive line too much. I'm pretty sure they had some good success with the defensive linemen that they had, but a lot of them left. So that's why I'm still sort of like confused on what they're trying to do. If they feel like they've got guys in the back that are good enough to fill in those positions. I know they went and picked up Flower, but like I said before, I don't like Fowler. I think he succeeded a lot because of defensive scheme and because of Aaron Donald. Now, he could prove me wrong, and I think getting 10 sacks next season would be a success. I think lower than that would be, that would be a bust to me for the amount of money you paid for him. But we'll see. I also have to say that it's going to suck for Falcons fans next season. They have the 5th strongest strength of schedule, but the teams that they play, it's the number one win-loss team. Like, if you put it all together, the wins and losses that they're going up against, they have the toughest of that. So they basically, to me, have the hardest schedule out of any team. And that sucks, especially because I like the Falcons. I think I think they've got a lot of good pieces, but I feel like with the way management has gone and the fact that they might have a huge bust in the guard and the tackle that they just picked up because they didn't do too great last season. And I know they're rookies, but you hope that they make progression next season.
Yep.
That's always what you hope for. But a lot of time it doesn't happen. We talked about how the tackles position is one of the scariest positions to draft. And when you use that as your 31st pick in the draft, you don't know what you're going to get. So we'll see. I hope for the best for the Falcons. I think that they can go 8-8, 7-9, just like they did last season, maybe even 9-7, get that 7th seed spot, maybe even 6 or 5. They have the talent. It really just depends on the other two teams that we're going to talk about, the Saints and the Bucks, whether or not they're going to do that.
It really kind of sucks for the Falcons. It's just kind of the same way for the Panthers, but the Falcons do have to play the Saints twice a year, and they do have to play the newly formed Bucks twice a year. So that's going to be that's kind of where their strength of schedule comes in. Like they play some of the best teams in their division like twice, or that's 4 games of their season. So those games, I think a lot of their how they do this season is really going to come down to how they perform against the Saints and how they perform against the Bucks. But of course, we have to see the Bucks actually move forward with what they've done. But
so that I'm gonna just transition straight into the Saints now that we started talking about how good this team is. I don't have a lot to say. I think they just needed one more piece to get over the hump, and they need Drew Brees to stay in a good enough shape before it's too late. They might have wasted their chance last season. I know they got screwed twice now, and what seems like they get screwed every year in the playoffs. Actually, 3 times if you want to count the Minnesota Miracle or the
Minneapolis
missed tackle there. Yeah. I mean, this team to me could go down in history as like one of the most successful teams.
Definitely.
I mean, they go 13-3. It feels like now every season.
Yep.
And they've got the talent, I think, to make a Super Bowl win. I think they can do it. It's more about just getting like one more good piece, which I feel like they might have got with Emmanuel Sanders, and filling in some defensive holes, which they did with Malcolm Jenkins, with Von Bell leaving. They've got, I feel like, one last chance to push for the Super Bowl, and it's this year. If they don't do it this year, they're going to be stuck with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, which you never know. Jameis Winston could turn into the next Drew Brees, because it took Drew Brees 2 teams or 3 teams to be any good before he
did get some eye surgery, so maybe he can actually see the guys he's throwing to.
Yeah, he got some eye surgery. Maybe he can see. And it sucks about what's happened here recently, but I don't feel like that's going to affect their play at all. I feel like Drew Brees is a good leader. He will fix it. He will get this right. Whatever he does, I feel like he's going to make the right decisions, get this team on track. They'll be Super Bowl bound if they make the right plays when it matters most.
Don't get screwed over by a ref.
Yeah. Honestly, it was just luck that Kirk Cousins got the ball first.
Yeah.
And, he did have that fumble late in the 4th quarter that allowed the Vikings to tie it up, to push it to overtime or whatever it was, 4th quarter. I can't quite remember. It's been a while, but it just wasn't their time. I feel like maybe next season, with Tom Brady being in town, they have a lot more on the line. They can make a statement, prove that they are the team to beat in the NFC.
I really think with the Saints, it's really going to kind of depend on their defense, because I think their offense has everything they need. Like, they have a pretty decent offensive line. Drew Brees in his career with the Saints has pretty much stayed clean most of the time he's been back there. They obviously have a freaking stud in Michael Thomas out there. They got their running back situation fully fledged out. They don't need to worry about that. So I think a lot of it's just going to rely on their defense. like we've talked about it a little bit on the previous episode. In the past, the Saints have had this thing where they have to score like 40, 45 or whatever points a game, and their defense has to hold the other team to 39, 44 points basically.
Yeah.
Like their defense just has to hold them to 1 point under, which is not a great system to run by, because eventually if your offense starts to like not do as well and not score as many points and not be that powerhouse, absolute dominant offense, then your defense is going to suffer because your defense can't hold them to actually points, or to not scoring so many points. So I'm saying if their defense can just hold it down and make moves this season, get a really good turnover ratio, because Drew Brees doesn't really tend to turn the ball over a whole lot. Alvin Kamara doesn't fumble a whole lot for the most part.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking if they got their defense moving in the right direction with a couple of the pickups they had this offseason, they'll be perfectly fine. They're gonna absolutely. A lot of people want to say that Tampa Bay is just gonna come in with their new additions and just
guns a-blazing and
just start running the league. But I really don't see that happening. I don't think the New Orleans Saints are going to let that happen. Like, Drew Brees is, I don't want to say prideful, because that makes it seem like he's kind of arrogant, but he has too much pride in his game to just let that happen. He's not going to just be like, oh no, Tom Brady's in town. Well, I'm rolling over now. I'm done. He's gonna go at it and be like, look, I love this challenge. He's been on the other side of the league for so long. It's kind of like when Tom Brady played Peyton Manning back in the day a little bit. They'd go at each other, and they were like, we're some of the best quarterbacks in the league. We got to play at that level.
Yeah, that's going to be so entertaining to have that storyline, having Tom Brady versus Drew Brees twice.
Yep.
I am looking forward to that. And looking at their schedule last season, their defense, it's average to above average, and if they just got like one more piece, like I said before, they could like take that next step, and I feel like they would be Super Bowl bound. But until they, this offense is crazy. It's really, really good, and I feel like that is always going to be their reason why they make it. But if they ended up finding some gem somewhere, like some unrestricted free agent that just makes it burst on the scene and is just crazy, like, this team would be unstoppable. And last season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they actually put up a decent fight the first time that they met in New Orleans. The game was 31-24. Pretty sure it came down to like the fourth quarter for that decision to be made, though, for sure. And we already know about Jameis Winston
throwing 40 interceptions a game.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. I can't wait to see Tampa Bay, and I feel like they're going to be really good, but the Saints are just too big of a juggernaut to just be pushed over. I mean, their 3 losses that they had during the regular season were to the Super Bowl losing Rams in week 2. And that was before they really started losing a lot of momentum, before teams started figuring them out. The offense didn't play that great. The defense actually played decently, but not good enough. They lost that game 9-27. Then they went and played their rivals, the Falcons, lost 9-26. That's another game that you can let slide. It's a rival team. You never can really predict rival games. They can be really intense. And then their third loss was to the 49ers, 46-48 in a all-out shootout.
Yeah, back and forth. Yep.
Giving up 48 points is unacceptable, like you said.
Yeah, 100%.
This is a way better team than 48 points. And I know 49ers are good. I know their offense is spectacular, but that's just, you can't do that and expect to win the Super Bowl. You got to keep things under control. And not to say that they haven't, but to me, the average for them is 28 points, which is four touchdowns.
Yeah.
And that is not good. That's not good enough. You need to bring it down to 21 and you'll be successful. But until that happens, you'll lose 20-26 and it'll hurt. because it'll come down the very last couple plays, and it'll just, it won't turn out good. And speaking of the way that they have tried to go after the officiating, sometimes you just gotta buckle down and say, I could have done more. Yeah. And I think they believe that. And I just hope that they continue that mentality, especially after I feel like they might feel cheated this last wild card game with the push off. But they were right on the goal line. Yeah. They were right there. You could have stopped them before that. Drew Brees didn't have to fumble there. He had an interception or two that game too. Yeah. There's so much that could have been different. And, sometimes some teams just have your number. Yeah. And it could be that simple that Vikings have just got Minnesota figured out. I know that the head coach, Mike Zimmer, he's good. He's a good defensive coordinator. Don't underestimate him.
I really just think with the Saints, I know that all the fans and everything are always like, oh, we get screwed every year. We get screwed. To be honest with you, I'm with you with the Rams and all that, with that hit. Yes, it that was complete crap. It shouldn't have gone down that way. But in all fairness to this is to every football team out there, even in like Pee Wee, or it's even any sport. It's any sport. You got to play well enough. You got to play hard enough that it shouldn't come down to a call by a referee. Because we know referees are human. They're not perfect. So you got to play as hard as you can, score as many points as you can, so that you don't have to worry about that last-second call where a guy gets his head taken off and they don't call it and yada, yada, and now you're mad. I really think the Saints moved on from that after, like, a little while. I don't think they were the pushing force behind the whole replay that game thing.
Yeah, and maybe I'm more just speaking about the fans, because I still see posts all the time like, we got cheated. It's June.
Yeah.
We're like almost 6 months away from that game, and they're still talking about it. And I'm like, I feel the pain. Like, as a fan, I understand the drive for your team and feeling cheated, especially us being Bengals fans in 2015. We will never forget that memory of feeling like we were cheated. But you gotta, when you play the game, you gotta know that there's margin of error.
Yep.
You gotta buckle down as fans and realize that no one can be perfect, especially in sports, including refs, including anyone in general, including teammates. They're never going to be perfect. And you got to learn to just move on from that.
Yeah, you got to learn to just roll with the punches, kind of do what you have to do to make sure that it doesn't come down to things like that. Because, again, human error allows for things like that to happen, like the whole push-off and everything. It's like, yeah, I guess it was. But to be fair, if it was the other way around, you guys, most of the fans would have been like, no, that was never a push-off. That was never a push-off. So you got to kind of look at it from both ways when things like that happen. I know, being Bengals fans, like you said, with 2015, how we feel we got cheated a little bit in the playoffs. But you got to look at it from the other side. We would have been like, well, I'm glad it happened, kind of thing. Like when you're on the other side. Yeah. So you just gotta look at it from both sides. Anytime things like that happen, it's like, yeah, we did get screwed there, but if I was on the other side, I'd be jumping for joy right now because my team's in the play or in the Super Bowl. So it's like, you gotta let it just run off your shoulder and move on to the next one and just keep it going.
And speaking of fortunes and Super Bowl hopes, we're gonna talk about the Bucs
and their acquisitions of literally everyone.
This team is really scary.
My quick question first. How do they have any money?
How do they have any money? I have no idea.
They picked up so much that I'm just confused on how they even remotely have the funds to sign any rookies or anything.
I don't really know. It's a good question. And part of it has to do with Tom Brady only taking $25 million a year, like he always does.
Tom Brady just wants to win championships. He doesn't
just
care
wants
about
to
no
win
money.
championships. And
Giselle has enough money for both of them.
And he wanted to live a lavish lifestyle in Florida.
In Florida, not being cold Boston anymore.
Yeah, I
screw that place.
Honestly, the perception of Tom Brady declining, I think the 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns or whatever, I would have to disagree with everyone who thinks that.
We kind of talked about that a little bit before the podcast today. When you decline from 1,999,000 is still great numbers down, but you're down from 1 million. So it's like, you can be down, but that doesn't necessarily mean you did anything wrong. So
yeah, and the acquisitions that they now have with Gronk and their draft picks, this team is a complete unknown, but a team that I don't think can't not win at least 10 games. I do not see them not making the playoffs at least. I feel like they don't have any chances of going under 10 games. So what does that mean for them? Well, that means that Tom Brady has wiggle room for a decline, but that also means that they need to have a balanced attack, and they need to be able to use and utilize his strengths with short game passes, swing routes, ins, outs that are 5 yards. And they've definitely got that talent to do that. I mean, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that combo is deadly. Mike Evans gets a lot of comparisons to AJ being like just a bigger version of AJ and a meaner version. That's true. He's nasty. Chris Godwin, he is nasty too. He did technically better than Mike Evans. I know he played more snaps, he played more games, but he statistically was really good, and PFF graded him like one of the best receivers right behind.
I really think a lot of that came down to so at Tampa Bay, I've heard this from a lot of different places. In the past couple of years, they're more of a gung-ho offense. Like with Jameis Winston back there, they would ask Jameis Winston to hold on to the ball, launch it down the field, because he has so many receivers that can just go up and get it, go down the field, run and get it. So I really think with Tom Brady, I think they're going to switch it up a little bit, because it's never really been Tom Brady's style to just hold it, blast it down the field. He's never really had that arm. He's more of just a technician guy. Like, he's going to pick you apart. He's going to find holes. He's especially with having O.J. Howard and Gronk out there, there's going to be a lot of potential for him to run multiple tight end sets and just throw the ball over the middle, dunk it out out to his tight ends and just different things like that. And even out of the backfield, he's got enough talent out of the backfield that he can just dump it out of the backfield if he really wants to. And then if they really find it necessary, they can run guys down the field, because Chris Godwin and
Mike
Evans, both. I don't really want to make that a comparison like this, but I'm going to have like that Tyreek Hill kind of thing where they can just book it down the field and hope for the best, because there's a lot of corners that can't cover just raw speed. If you just start running and go and make one cut, a lot of defenders will get caught up in that and then lose their way, break their own ankles, something like that, and then bada bing, bada boom, you're wide open down the field. And Tom Brady, one of the most freaking great, like considered the GOAT by a lot of people, has the ball in the backfield and you're wide open. So like there's a lot of potential for this offense. They can just absolutely go off at any point.
Yeah. And looking at their schedule last season, they went 7-9. Was that right? 7-9?
Yes, I believe so.
And the 6 of their 9 losses came within a touchdown.
Yeah.
And you want to know what a lot of that stems from? It's from turning the ball over 40 plus times.
Jameis Winston's interceptions.
Yeah, going from someone who scores who scores that much but turns the ball over, and to someone that scores just as much as Jameson did and turns the ball over like
half the time.
0 times. This team is going to be scary. And I cannot wait. You know, they turn things around the end of their season. So they're going to carry that momentum.
Yep.
And, you know, they kind of got dealt a bad hand just with momentum's sake. The first game that they played was San Francisco. That's rough.
Yep.
And then they go ahead and just absolutely beat the runner-up Super Bowl champs 55-40. You know, that's kind of insane. And what's crazy to me is that even with all that, those problems with them giving up that many turnovers, and the reason Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they gave up probably an average of close to 30 points a game. A lot of that stemming off of their turnover issues. And what's crazy is that this offense averaged probably like 29 points.
Yep.
And it's going to be crazy with Tom Brady. He's going to be throwing the ball everywhere. It's going to be different because he's going to learn to play their style, and they're going to mix in his style, and it's going to work. I'm telling you, he's played multiple offenses, unlike most people think. He's played with, you know, the guy that's still there. What's his name?
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now. But I really think with Tom Brady, even he could even throw half as many interceptions as Jameis Winston did, and I really think they have a chance because a lot of, as you were saying, the 9 losses came down to like barely anything. They would throw, like, Jameis Winston would throw like 2 pick sixes in a game, say, or something like that. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before. I think it was last season. They played the Rams, and it might not have been the Rams. I think they played a game in London either last year or the year before, and Jameis Winston almost threw a record number of interceptions in a game. And that's coming off of a guy who threw like 5-6 interceptions in a game in the past before. So you really got to think if the Buccaneers could have been good last year. They could have been really that last playoff team to make it in. They could have been any of the wild cards like easily, because if they would have just not had so many turnovers, there's just so much that comes with turnovers. It's momentum swings, and say you throw a pick six, suddenly the game's tied again. You were up, had all the momentum in the world. You were up 7. You had the ball. You were driving down the field. Suddenly, boom, pick 6. Game's tied. Momentum is back in the middle, more aiming towards the other side. So it's like maybe if they just didn't have those turnovers last season, and I'm not saying that it's all Jameis Winston's fault, because with
I am.
I mean, with the style that they were trying to run, they did ask Jameis Winston to sit back there, then launch the ball. And a lot of that came down to, like, let's hope our receivers can get it. And when you have to sit back there for so long and you see guys, like, coming at you and you just chuck the ball, you're not going to be accurate at all. Like, there's just no way you're going to be.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, that being said, you still can't throw that many interceptions in a season. There's literally zero excuse to be an NFL quarterback and throw that many interceptions in a season. Like Peyton Manning, I think his rookie or his second year or something like that,
28,
threw a record number of interceptions, and then Jameis Winston just goes and blows that out of the water. I'm like, dude,
he's been in the league 5 years.
Yeah, and you've been in the league long enough. So I think with the Bucs, it's really going to be interesting. One thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. It's not necessarily about the NFC South or the Bucs necessarily, but kind of I just wanted to get your take on how you think the whole Patriots organization was going with Gronk retiring and Tom Brady leaving, and then Gronk coming back and being like, look, I can play again. Do you think that it just kind of came down to, so Gronk said he retired because he was hurting and he was getting hurt all the time and he didn't want to play anymore? But do you think it could have been because Bill Belichick, and he didn't want to play for Bill Belichick and that organization anymore, and he was like, this organization is kind of toxic to him? Or do you think it just came down to, hey, I can have the opportunity to play again in a new city, and I'm going to go beat Gronk and party in Florida?
I think it's a little bit of everything, because, you know, Tom Brady, he was been in the league 5 years. I think it's a little bit of everything, because, you know, I think it's a little bit of everything, because, Gronk is a very fun personality. He wants to have fun, and he has fun winning, but he also has a lot of fun partying
Yeah.
and relaxing. And I don't think he could really do that with Bill Belichick. He demanded greatness,
Yep.
and greatness requires dedication and
No nonsense. type
no
thing.
nonsense sort of mentality. So part of me thinks he retired because, he is injury prone, and he's got a lot of options on both sides. He's got a lot. I don't blame him for retiring and then coming back, because he's got a perfect opportunity to do so. He doesn't have to be the main guy like he was in New England. He can afford to not play every snap, but he
Yep.
wants to be there and have fun with Tom Brady. He knows Tom Brady will get him the ball, and he can preserve himself more
Yep.
while being in Tampa too. So it's I think this will be something that we look at and go, in the media at least, oh, he did this because he hates Bill Belichick. But the way I see it is that he really was retired. He was done with football. He didn't want to go and work and tear his body down more.
Yeah.
He wants to go out and have fun with what he can still do. So I bet you when we see him play next season, he'll be taking limited number of snaps.
Mm-hmm.
He might be just goal line situation, which if he's goal line situation, he still can have like 10 touchdowns in a season. He
Exactly.
can still be that dominant guy. We'll see. We don't know what's going to happen with O.J. Howard or Karen Brate. We don't know if those guys are being traded or if they're going to stay on the roster or not.
You can kind of tell that Gronk and Brady really like to have fun together, because I know you've probably seen that Twitter video of them with the horn and Gronk being summoned and then him running up and being like all out of breath, just "I'm here" kind of thing.
Yeah.
They like to have fun. So I'm kind of thinking a lot of it stemmed from not necessarily that Bill Belichick's a bad guy or anything, but he has a win first mentality, have fun later. And obviously, you never see that in the freaking media, because even on his draft day, the most fun he had was him feeding a biscuit to his dog and then walking off camera. Everyone laughed it up for that, but he was just that's the most serious I've ever seen anyone feed a biscuit to a dog. And he was just all business. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he says a lot of the time, Bill Belichick says it's him and he can win without Tom Brady. He doesn't really need Tom Brady. I think that relationship started to get sour a few years ago. I really think that Robert Kraft was the reason that Brady even stayed in New England for that long. I think Bill Belichick, not that he was like trying to get rid of Brady, like, oh, I want to be the big ego kind of thing, but he was like, look, Brady's starting to get old. He's like, I know Brady's starting to get old. I think he liked the guy. I think he loved him to death, because you would love a quarterback that wins you freaking 6 rings, but you got to be like, look, he's starting to get old. He's not going to be able to play at his highest, like he was back in the day. So we need to kind of start to move on, kind of find something else. And I really think him moving out to Tampa, like you were saying, Gronk knows that there's other weapons and everything, that he doesn't have to be that number one guy. He doesn't have to be him. It doesn't have to be him and Julian Edelman. And even Julian Edelman last season was so broke down that he couldn't play. Like, every pass became a hospital pass to him.
Yeah.
So I really think that's going to be kind of a thing that helps Gronk in Tampa, is that he's not going to have to catch hospital passes, because he's not the only guy. He can catch literally anything and not get absolutely blasted. And with a lot of his division, you can look at that division and kind of be like, look, a lot of that division, their defense isn't great. So the Bucs have all the potential in the world to score freaking 40 points a game on average, just based on those 6 games they have to play in their division. So I think Tom Brady has a whole lot of potential, and Gronk too. And even the rest of them, like, they all have so much potential to just absolutely go crazy next season. But again, in that whole division, it comes down to their defense. If their defense can put up some stops, put up some numbers, get some turnovers and things like that, I think the Buccaneers could absolutely easily keep up with the Saints and probably split with them, and then just be trying to run the tables with them next year.
Yeah, what I'll just pose this question: is the Saints defense or the Tampa Bay defense better? Which one's better? Because according to the numbers here, Tampa Bay is better, but marginally.
I kind of see again. I always go every time this question's posed to me. I always go back to the Saints defense of the past, where they just hold people to 40 points and they score 41. So I mean, I have kind of an unfair bias when it comes to that question. So I mean, I do think the Bucs defense will be better next season. I don't necessarily say they were better last season. I know that they haven't graded higher, yada yada, but to be fair, the Bucs defense was probably on the field a whole lot more than the Saints defense was, just based on the million turnovers. So it's kind of a comparison. Like you can look at the numbers and be like, oh well, the Bucs were technically better by a bit, but when it comes down to it, you also got to look at the turnovers and the fact that this and to go back a little bit real quick. It's kind of crazy that the Saints were 13-3, considering they lost Drew Brees, which is considered their franchise quarterback of all time, like the best quarterback they've ever had. And to have Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill come in and take over those kind of like mixed responsibilities, I think really speaks a lot to the team in general. So like the team just rallied together, won 13 freaking games without their star quarterback, without their number one leader on the team. Yeah, he was still on the sideline, clapping them up, telling them what they had to do, kind of thing. But it's not the same when he's just not out there and kind of being that game manager kind of thing. So I mean, I really do think the Bucs have more potential than the Saints, if that makes sense, because the Saints are already kind of at their cap, kind of at their
their max.
Yeah, they're kind of at their potential area, but the Bucs have through the entire roof, like they have to the sky, they have the moon.
They have legendary status, possibly.
Yeah.
They could go break Peyton Manning's touchdown record. They could go break the show or whatever.
The greatest show on turf.
Greatest show on turf. And you know, we didn't even mention the Bucs running backs, but the rookie could really bust out. And there's rookie running backs that just always manage to do great. And considering how they're going to be so focused on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, they're probably going to just run free.
And another little fact that we kind of left out a little bit, as I alluded to earlier with Jameis Winston sitting in the pocket, just sitting there, bombing the ball. You got to know the offensive line is used to freaking protect him for like a good 5-6 seconds. They're used to having to sit there, and like keep the guy in. So like Tom Brady moving the ball that quick, I don't think he's going to have a lot of pressure this year. Not that their offensive linemen are the best in the league or they're absolutely insane like the Saints.
They ranked up top 10 actually. They were really good.
But they are like you just said, they are really good. So it's like Tom Brady with that offensive line, like we know what happens. What happened in New England when he had an offensive line? When he had a really good offensive line, he had time. He could do a lot. That's when they just started scoring, and their offense led the league, and everybody else got screwed. So I mean, I don't know if the Bucs offensive line can hold up, and their defense can just even do like a little bit. I think the Bucs have all the potential in the world to go through the freaking moon.
Yeah, and I feel like the games that are going to come down and matter the most, Saints and Tampa, those two games are going to determine a lot of the NFC playoff proceedings. You know, we could see Saints being like 12-4 and the Bucs being 12-4, and what would you do there? You know, like you could potentially have two teams that are just like neck and neck, one being the number 2 or number 1 spot and then being the 5th or 6th spot. You know, it could really change how things are. It's going to be a great season for Bucs fans. They really deserved it too.
Yeah, I really think it's going to be kind of interesting, especially with the other side a little bit. Not to get off track too much, but with you got the Seahawks and the Niners out there, which is always kind of an interesting dynamic, especially with San Francisco being on the way up, assumably still on their way up. Going to continue off from the loss. Maybe your bad juju stuff hits them. But
I'm a big believer in it. Just look at the last couple seasons. Yep. The teams that lose, except for the Patriots, they're the only ones that
Patriots are an anomaly.
Yeah, they're an anomaly. Every team that loses in the Super Bowl usually doesn't do what they're supposed to do. You know, they don't make a playoff push. They lose in the wild card round, or they don't even make it. And it's you just gotta watch them, and we'll see. I feel like maybe considering how a lot of the teams are just now getting into training camp, and with everything that's been going on socially and medically, that, you know, maybe some teams will have a better advantage. But I just feel like the 49ers probably will have a bit of a downturn, and we'll see some more competition in the NFC. Usually the big dog is the Saints, and I still feel like it will be. They have been kind of an anomaly when it comes to the playoffs. Most teams that lose in the playoffs don't do as good the next season.
They just continue to roll on.
Yeah. So all about momentum. They are momentum defiers, and I feel like they will continue to do so into next season. But after that, it's up in the air from there. But back to the Tampa Bay. The team has legendary status on paper. It really just depends on, I feel like, coaching staff now. Do they have the coaching staff to do it?
I really think their coaching staff, I've seen some of the things they do, not necessarily in practice, obviously, because like you're not going to see a lot of practice film.
Yeah, and
from teams,
to also clarify, it's Bruce Arians and
Bruce
Todd
Arians.
Bowles.
Yep. So I've seen a lot of what like Bruce Arians does, at least on the field. And again, not necessarily on the practice field, but he has a lot of like, this is what we're doing. This is kind of like his idea. This is like kind of demanding. Yeah, he works with his guys, and that's important for any coach. Like, you have to work with your guys. But I think a lot of what Bruce Arians does, like he has a really good mind for the game. So combining that with Tom Brady, that's going to be another just insane kind of combo off. Like,
he's worked with great quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Carson Palmer.
There you go. And he can just, like, again, they have all the potential in the world. A lot of their coaching is just going to come down to, can they make sure they're on the same page with the shortened workouts and everything. And I think that's what a lot of it's going to come down to the Bucs and Saints, I think. And it's going to come down to a lot of just which team was more prepared quicker. Because I think the beginning of the season is going to be the real kicker for a lot of teams. If you can start off fast and keep that momentum going, then you'll be all right. And then you can, like, not fall off, because it's not, you never want to fall off, but like fall off towards the end of the season. And
you
then
have the wiggle room.
Yeah, then you have the wiggle room at the end of the season. So when you come into the very beginning of the season, you just start popping off. Especially, again, with the lack of training that guys have been able to do. Yeah, they can do their own home training and things like that. But if they didn't have that set up before the whole pandemic and everything and the closure started, then they didn't really have an option. So I think a lot of those guys, they probably did like outside workouts, like went and ran, things like that. But there's a difference between being in game shape, being in playing shape, and being just in like shape in general. Because a guy that goes to the gym 7 times a day, that eats like perfectly and is like ripped, isn't necessarily in football playing condition. Like, he could go out and try to play football, but after like that fourth quarter, after getting hit, it just takes a toll on you. So I really think the preseason is going to matter a lot to these guys. I kind of think that a lot of the rookies should play a whole lot more this preseason than they normally would. I think rather than doing the whole 2 quarters, put the backup in, kind of just to get off topic a little bit, just to make my point here, with like Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow should play a little bit more in the preseason than they normally would, because normally they'd be like, oh, first game, 2 quarters out, second game, quarter and a half out, third game, 1 quarter, fourth game, not at all. I think they should up that a little bit, start playing them a little bit in the fourth game, playing maybe just like a quarter, and then take them out. Because I really think a lot of guys coming out of the NCAA, like coming out of college and everything, underestimate a little bit how much of a toll it actually takes. And like by mid-season, you hit a wall. like you're like, holy crap, I've been hit so many times, I've been bruised up so many times that it's starting to get crazy. So I think getting that little bit of extra hitting in the preseason, because again they have the shortened workouts and they have the shortened stuff, and I assume when they do 100% go back to doing all these things, there's still going to be restrictions on them being able to like hit during practice. Like they're not going to be able to just go out and hit for like 3 hours or so. They're only going to be able to hit like an hour, and then they have to kind of disperse a little bit and not be as many people in one area. Because
not to mention that, like you said, not many people in an area, but they're going to be split up into their own individual groups.
Yeah, so it's going to be a real test on one, team chemistry, with not being together all the time, being able to study film in a tiny little 3x3 room. You're going to have that compatibility chemistry kind of thing that you need to look out for. You need to look out for teams hitting the wall. And like, I think that's where the Buccaneers and Saints kind of have an advantage over everybody else in their division. They have like a lot of like tested veterans. Like they have those guys that know what it's like to kind of be in a situation kind of thing. Like with Michael Thomas even being kind of a guy like that, even though he's not like a massive like old veteran type thing. And having Mike Evans with the Bucks and Gronk and Brady, all those guys I feel like are going to help them a lot make it through those kind of woes that they're going to have at the beginning of the season. And I really think that's where their potential comes out, to where they'll be the top two easily in their division, and even possibly in the NFC.
Yeah, I agree. And so we come to the close of our podcast. Record predictions.
Oh, no.
What do you think the Panthers will go?
I really think the Panthers, at best, I really don't think they do better than 8-8, to be honest with you. They, like I was saying, they have a lot of potential. They did bring in a lot of depth, a lot of different things, but I think they could be that last playoff team and make a good push if Teddy Bridgewater comes in and does his job. But at the end of the day, it's kind of unlikely in comparison to everything else that's happening in their division.
And that's best case scenario, right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Best case scenario.
Okay, so what I predict them going is probably 6-10, because
Yeah.
I think Teddy Bridgewater is a good quarterback, so I'm gonna give them that. And I just don't think they did enough with the offensive line to improve massively, so I give them one extra win. But I agree, they have potential to be 8-8. I think that's their max, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Falcons.
See, you're a little bit higher on the Falcons than I am. I do think they have like a decent amount, but again, it's like you look at what they did in the offseason, you're just questioning everything they do. Obviously, we're not professionals. We're not like those guys in the war room.
Yeah, we're not sports analysts, are we?
Yeah, so you kind of have to think maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they know what was going on. Maybe they were like, we know Todd Gurley can come in here and be that absolute guy. I really don't. I think 9-7, 10-6,
best
maybe.
potential.
At max.
I don't even think I would give them 10-6 because they've got such a tough schedule.
Yeah,
but I just don't see them. It's hard for me to give them a terrible losing record too.
Yeah.
So like 7-9 is the worst case. Like this team, I feel like has a really tight range, and with such a tough strength of schedule, they're going to pull out wins that they shouldn't because of the talent that they have. And they can win against any team on any given Sunday. And it really just depends on health of some players and whether or not that they make the right steps forward with this team. If the linemen progress forward, if Todd Gurley works out, and if it does happen, 9-7 is max, 7-9 is worst case.
Yeah.
Saints.
So with the Saints, I kind of, again, it's kind of one of those things where you look at their schedule like last season and this season, kind of compare them a little bit, and then you're like, well, they do have a harder time against. They're gonna have a harder time against the Bucks. Obviously, there's no way the Bucks just come in like to your town and you just roll over them with all the talent that they got. And it's kind of the same way with the Falcons. They acquired some guys, so it's going to be a pretty tough game regardless. So I mean, the Saints have all the potential in the world to be 13-3 again, to do that, because you're going to have your random losses. It's almost impossible for a team to go 16-0 in the regular season. It's only happened, twice, I think.
Yeah.
The Dolphins and the Patriots once. So it's kind of like you're going to have your random losses. Like, it's going to happen. They're going to have an off day. Drew Brees is not going to throw the best game of his life. Their defense is going to give some stuff up. So I think probably like around 13-3, 12-4 kind of area at max. But at worst, I don't think they win any less than 10. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they lose. I don't think they win any less than 10. I don't think they win any more than probably 12. I think they have a really tight range too because of the Bucs coming into town and just the fact that we don't know with the team chemistry thing and if Drew Brees is going to be fine. He is a little bit older, but I agree with you. 10-6, 12-4. That's the range. Buccaneers.
Yeah. So with the Bucs, it's kind of, again, they have literally unlimited potential. So they could be anywhere from, honestly, I think they could be a 15-win team out of nowhere. And you're like, wow, this is crazy. Like the Bucs just really turned it around from 7-9 to 15 wins. Because as you said, last season they were in almost every game they played. There's they did have a couple of losses that were pretty bad, but a lot of the games they were in till the last minute, and they had everything going for them. So I think with these additions that they made, kind of moving things around a little bit, I think Bruce Arians and them could go like 15-1, like have 15 wins. But again, as I said in the last podcast, it doesn't. Again, I know that Brady and Gronk have played together a lot in the past. But just because you bring in talent, just because you surround someone with talent and you bring all this talent onto one single team doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. Like we said in the last podcast, you look at the Browns. A lot of people thought they were going to the Super Bowl, a lot of Browns fans, and then they got their break beat off of them, and they were like, okay, we need to take a step back and kind of look and see, hey, look, this thing happened. So, I mean, I know we keep saying they have all the potential in the world, but they also, just because you bring in people doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win games and win games and win games. Yeah. I don't see them losing a lot, but I mean, I don't see them losing or winning any less than 10, 11 games.
Yeah, I feel like this team has the biggest range because I don't personally feel like Tom Brady is going downhill.
Yeah, no.
But I will give myself the margin of error anyways and say that their worst case scenario is 8-8 and their best case scenario is 16-0. Like this team has the potential to be great, and we haven't seen this since probably like Peyton Manning, but we didn't even really going to the the Broncos. Yeah. But we didn't even know that he had stellar talent there. Anyways, like he made those guys. This is already established talent coming in, and they're gonna just dominate.
Yeah, so you're kind of looking at as we kind of alluded to earlier, like the Greatest Show on Turf with Kurt Warner and them. You're kind of looking at a situation where they could literally go in and absolutely dominate everyone in the league, but you could also have just kind of a thing where they had like with Joe Flacco going to Denver. Everyone was like, Joe Flacco could go there and kind of be what Peyton Manning was and kind of light a fire into this team and start going somewhere. And then he just absolutely busts and it just doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think Tom Brady's going to be an absolute bust because, as you said, I don't think he's declining necessarily. Like everyone, of course, declines a little bit. And again, as we said earlier, you can decline from 1 million and still be 999,000. So like that's technically a decline, but it's still stellar numbers. So I mean, I really think Tom Brady has all the potential in the world to win a whole lot of games. But I also think that, as I said, you could bring in all the talent in the world and then just be the Browns.
Yeah, and to go off of Tom Brady for a little bit, he and his ability to adapt to a new system. Yeah. He's had 4 different offensive coordinators, Charlie Weiss, Josh McDaniels. There was a time where he didn't have a coordinator, so I'm just going to chalk that up as the 3rd coordinator, and then Bill O'Brien.
Yep.
And all of them had different systems, different schemes.
Yeah.
And we'll see how well he does. They were all very similar to each other, but I feel like he's going to be able to adapt just fine, and they're going to be okay with whatever system that they decide to create, and they're gonna just be scary.
Yeah.
Every team's gonna be scared of them every game. Even if they start losing, they're still gonna be scared that the GOAT's on the other side.
Yeah, I really I hate to call Tom Brady the GOAT because again, it's like different eras. You're playing in different eras, so like Joe Montana could arguably be better because if he'd had the protection Tom Brady does and not being able to be hitting things. But I really think one of the arguments for Tom Brady being the GOAT is that he's a really adaptive player. Like he can, like you said, he's had so many different coordinators, and of course they're playing under Belichick, so they're going to kind of morph their thing to what Bill Belichick wants. But Tom Brady is a really adaptive player, and he can kind of do what he needs to do to make things happen, and he kind of brings guys together, and he's a smart guy. So like he can teach guys. Even say you could bring in a guy off the street, honestly, and that was kind of a joke a few years ago that the Patriots could bring a guy off the street, a random dude who's never played football in his entire life. If he can run a route, if he can learn to run a route, Tom Brady can teach him. So I really think that, especially having such great talent around him, I say great, but they're really good. They're really good. Receivers, backs, even offensive line who can freaking hold people for 20 minutes with Jameis Winston back there. So again, Tom Brady can come in there and just light things up because again, he's adaptive. He can mold to a new system. I don't think they're going to change what he's done in the past a whole lot. Like I think Bruce Arians is kind of going to change his offense a little bit to kind of mold more to Tom Brady. Obviously, he's not going to change the whole thing because then you kind of screw over your guys who've been there for a long time and they know your system and what they have to do. But I do think he's going to kind of morph how they run it and what certain plays they run. So,
yeah. And do you have anything else to?
No, I think that's it. I just really, again, as I said in the first podcast, I'm really excited for even the NFC. Like I'm not a big NFC guy because obviously we support teams in the AFC, the Bengals or whatever. But I think the NFC is going to be real competitive with Saints, Bucks, Seattle, 49ers, the Rams. I do think the Rams have a chance to be a little bit of a kind of a sleeper a little bit. So
bounce back.
Yeah, a little bounce back. The Eagles, the Cowboys, all of those teams. They all
Vikings.
Like I think the NFC is becoming the more competitive division, more out there division with a little bit of Tom Brady moving because now it's not the Patriots and the Chiefs kind of thing going back and forth with the Ravens a little bit. It's more of just an open kind of thing. So
yeah, I guess that will conclude our episode today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I've been Casey.
I'm Thomas.
And this is the Championship Formula. We're out.
See you.